I'm Sammy.
And I'm Nicole.
And we are Spooky Sleuths.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Welcome back to Spooky Sleuths for a bonus episode.
Yes, we're so excited to be able to give you guys a couple extra episodes to binge.
Thank you, CJ, for taking care of business tonight so we could spend our time recording. So what are we going to talk about today?
We're going down the serial killer road today.
Oh, we love a good serial killer story, which says more about us, I think, than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, no serial killers are good, but I hate this guy. This week we're going to talk about Dennis Rader, aka the BTK killer. Dennis Rader was an active serial killer for over 30 years and managed to stay unknown to the police despite constant taunting. So let's get into it.
I remember, not to interrupt, but I remember when this guy was caught. Like, I remember it being all over the news.
I don't remember, but I was also 10. So I don't think I was into true crime when I was 10.
Noob.
Well, Dennis Rader was born on March 9th, 1945. He was born and raised in what seemed like a normal childhood. He was the oldest of 3 children and took the big brother role seriously. He was described as a responsible young man. Dennis himself, as well as others that knew the Rader family, state that he never experienced any physical or sexual abuse in his home. His parents were married. He stayed out of trouble. Nothing major happened in his childhood that would suspect anyone to think that he would become a serial killer.
That's so weird. They always have terrible backstories. I was expecting the tea.
Well, there's a couple of incidents that, looking back especially, could hint at his future career.
Okay.
While he was a young boy, he would become aroused by killing animals.
There it is.
Not just killing animals, but killing them in ways that involved bondage of some kind.
There it is. Okay, we found it.
For example, he enjoyed hanging cats. He also was present when a chicken was being slaughtered on a farm. He became aroused when they tied up the chicken prior to killing it.
I have had to butcher 2 of my lovely chickens, and I couldn't imagine that bringing
any form of arousal.
Or even just joy. It's an awful experience.
Yeah. Dennis also liked magazines that would show women bound on the cover. Needless to say, Dennis developed dark fantasies involving binding women. He would create drawings of women bound with pain in their faces. Dennis served in the Air Force in the 1960s. When he completed his service, he moved back home to Wichita, Kansas. He became a crew chief for ADT Security in 1974, and he married a woman named Paula, who he has 2 kids with. Remember that he worked for a security company.
Noted.
So he worked at ADT Security until 1991, when he became a compliance officer in Park City, Kansas, basically a code enforcer. Dennis was very active in his church, Christ Lutheran Church. In fact, he became the congregation president in January 2005. January 15th, 1974 is when Dennis would commit his first murders. The Otero family lived in Wichita, Kansas, and was a family of 7. Julie and Joseph were the parents, and they had 5 children. Julie and Joseph met in high school in New York and moved to Wichita in the 1970s. Joseph was a military man, but when he retired from the military, he moved the family to Wichita to work at Cook Airfield. All the kids were thriving, doing well in school, and overall the family was happy. On January 15th, 1974, Joseph took the 3 oldest children to school early. The older one wanted to get there early for an extra study hall, and the 2 other older kids joined him. So he left Julie at home with their 9-year-old Joey and their 11-year-old Josie. Joseph returned home to assist Julie with getting the younger kids ready for school when an intruder entered the home. Dennis would enter the home through the back door after cutting their phone lines so they could not call for emergency assistance. When Dennis entered the home, he pointed a weapon at Joseph and told him that he wanted money. Dennis proceeded to tie up Julie and Joseph and both of the children. He then strangled Joseph, then strangled Julie, and then strangled Joey. After the other three were dead, Dennis took Josie down to the basement. He didn't strangle Josie. He hanged her. After he killed Josie, he masturbated at the scene. There were no signs of SA to any of the bodies, but the fact that he chose to masturbate near Josie suggested to authorities that he was a pedophile.
Valid.
Strangling is a very personal way to kill someone. There are so many opportunities to stop, and you're applying consistent, hard pressure to the neck. Strangling represents an extreme form of coercion and control.
Yeah.
With 11 pounds of pressure, it takes 4 to 5 minutes to strangle someone. You can stop at any point. That is a long time to apply that amount of pressure, and you're looking at them.
Yeah, it doesn't happen like it does in the movies. Like, it's not as instantaneous.
No, it's not 10 seconds and they're gone. It takes a while for brain death to fully set in.
Right.
When the oldest kids got home from school, their house was a mess, and they found their mom's purse on the floor. They looked for their parents, and 2 of the children found them deceased. They actually thought their parents were pranking them. When they realized it wasn't a prank, the 3 children ran to their neighbor's house to call the police. The police asked the oldest son if he thought Joseph could have done this, which the son denied. The police began working this as a home invasion gone wrong. When they began investigating the crime scene, the police found the 2 children's deceased bodies. A chaplain informed...
So the kids didn't find the children?
Nope. A chaplain informed the older children about their siblings, and they were, of course, devastated.
Right, but...
It's better than them finding them.
They found the parents. Like, that's traumatic in and of itself.
Yeah. The police did, from what I can tell, the best they could with what they had. Back in 1974, DNA testing was not a thing. But they did think ahead and collect the semen sample that Dennis left at the scene. They also interviewed over 800 people within the next 2 weeks.
So they were at least attempting their due diligence.
Yeah, they interviewed people. They set up traffic stops. They even looked outside of Wichita, too, exploring the possibility that it was someone from overseas that Joseph interacted with during his time in the military.
Okay.
And the possibility that the murders were drug-related. None of these theories turned anything up. Just 4 months later, in April of 1974, Dennis felt the need to feel that thrill he got from murdering the Otero family.
I'm sorry, will you repeat that time again?
4 months.
He only made it 4 months?
Yes. He picked a woman named Catherine Bright, who was 23 years old and lived with her sister. Catherine went to lunch with her brother, Kevin. While they were out, Dennis broke into Catherine's home and hid until she came home.
That is so scary.
It is. It makes me think, like, I don't lock my door. What if I came home? It'd probably just be Dave playing a prank on me. But Dennis did not...
I mean, but still, what if you came home?
I know. I can't think about it. Dennis did not anticipate coming home.
Sammy's not sleeping tonight.
Nope. Dennis didn't anticipate Kevin coming home with Catherine, but he did. Dennis ambushed the siblings and told them he was on the run from California and he just needed money and a car. Dennis had Kevin tie up Catherine. Then he took Kevin into the other room where Kevin began fighting Dennis. And during their tussle, Kevin managed to get control of Dennis's weapon and point it to his stomach. When Kevin pulled the trigger on the weapon didn't fire.
He had no intent, like, as in he had no intention on using the weapon, or it just...
Oh, no, it just jammed.
Okay.
This gave Dennis the opportunity to gain back control of the weapon, and he shot Kevin.
Ah, okay.
Kevin was not giving up and continued to fight Dennis after he had been shot.
That's strong will.
So Dennis shot him again. Thinking he finally subdued Kevin, Dennis turned his attention to Catherine. While Dennis is with Catherine, somehow Kevin managed to muster up the strength to sneak out of the door to try to get help. Catherine was also fighting Dennis. He did not like when he did not have control of the situation, so he needed to subdue Catherine quickly. He stabbed her 13 times before leaving, just walking down the street. He walked away rather than jumped in his car because it was less suspicious, as he stated.
I mean, kind of. Nobody would suspect that.
Yeah, if you're just casually walking down the street. Catherine mustered up the strength to crawl to a phone that didn't have the lines cut and call for emergency assistance. 911 wasn't a thing yet. So they had to call the operator.
And get there. Yeah.
The ambulance took her to the hospital, where she was able to speak with police and give a description of Dennis. This was valuable, as now the police had a sketch of the man. Sadly, however, Catherine died just a few hours after getting to the hospital.
Where's Kevin?
Her brother Kevin made it to the neighbors to call for help. He did survive his wounds. Police didn't connect Catherine and the Otero's murders.
I wouldn't have either. They're not similar at all.
The only thing that connected the two was that it was a home invasion of the middle of the day. I also think if they looked at the binding aspect of both cases, they might have connected them. Maybe.
Still a stretch, though.
Yeah. Either way, the motive of the cases was not similar. The police did not find any rope around Catherine's neck, which is thought to have been deliberate on Dennis's part. Catherine had ligature marks around her neck, but there was no rope. So they think that he did that on purpose to make his MO different or cause a shadow of a doubt in their minds that this was done by the same killer as the Oteros, because they had all of their ligatures around their neck. Dennis did all of this on purpose. He wanted to keep changing his motive to keep from getting caught. He also wore disguises and used an accent to avoid any suspicion. After Catherine's murder, Dennis decided it was time to toy with the police a little. He called a reporter at the Wichita Eagle newspaper, telling him that a letter was waiting for him in a specific place in the library.
Was Zodiac Killer before his time?
Right. I think he was in the 60s in California.
Oh, let's pull a feather out of that hat.
The reporter went to get the letter and immediately knew he had to give it to the police. The letter contained detailed information about the Otero crime scene that only the killer and the police knew. He also talked about himself in the letter, saying, "I'm sorry this happened to society. They are the ones who suffer the most. It's hard to control myself. You probably call me psychotic with sexual perversion hang up. When this monster enter my brain, I will never know. But it here to stay. How does one cure himself? If you ask for help that you have killed 4 people, they will laugh or hit the panic button and call the cops. I can't stop it, so the monster goes on and hurt me as well as society." He also uses very bad grammar and misspellings in his letters, which I don't know if is intentional or not. It was his first letter as well that Dennis gave himself a code name, BTK.
Wait a minute. Dennis?
He gave himself, yes.
Named himself?
So I am only referring to him as Dennis? Why are you naming yourself? You don't do that.
Why did he do any of the things he did?
He stated in his letter, "P.S. Since sex criminals do not change their MO, or by nature cannot do so, I will not change mine. The code words for me will be bind them, torture them, kill them. BTK. You see he added again. They will be on the next victim." But who names themselves? That really shows his need for power and control.
I didn't know he named himself. I mean, because we as a society love putting names on that kind of thing.
Right, like you mentioned the Zodiac Killer.
The Night Stalker.
In this letter, he is eager to make sure to let the police know that he is the guilty one, not the others that they have suspected. He specifically mentions the 4 men that they are holding are not guilty. The police made the decision not to publish the letter, and the newspaper followed suit.
Well, that's good.
They hoped by not publishing the letter, they would deter him from committing more murders.
Not successful.
It seemed to be what happened. For 3 years, there were no new murders.
Oh, okay. So maybe then? Because he only went 4 months between the first 2.
Right. The police also suspected that he could have moved or even died. On March 17th, 1977, Dennis felt the need to kill again. So he picked out a target. He chose a house where 2 females lived, thinking this would be a challenge to kill 2 women rather than 1. Well, thankfully for those 2 women, they weren't home. So Dennis moved on to another target that he had picked out, but that person wasn't home either. Dennis was very frustrated, and he started walking through the neighborhood and alleyways. While walking down the street, Dennis met a young 5-year-old boy.
Oh, no.
The boy's okay.
Okay, all right. Keep going then.
Dennis introduced himself to the boy, saying he is a private investigator and needs help finding someone. He shows the boy a picture of a mother and child. The child obviously did not know who these people were and went on his way to his house. Dennis followed the boy, watched him enter the home, and decided this was his next target. Now, this is not planned in advance. Dennis was not prepared as he usually is. When Dennis picks a target, he first trolls for a victim. Trolling is when he rides around the neighborhood and he'll see a woman. She could be walking down the street, sitting on her porch. Once he picks her, he said he would point to her from his car and say to himself, "She's next." The next step he takes is to stalk his victim. He would research the person to get all the public information he could find. He'd go through their mail to find out where they work, and he would follow them to learn their routine.
So he did the legwork. It just was complete coincidence that they weren't home whenever he decided to
It didn't pan out for the first one, so he got mad and was like, "I'm still killing today." After he stalks them, he names his project as he calls his victims. This provides him with an organized process to follow. Anyway, back to this next victim. The home belonged to Shirley Vian, a 26-year-old single mother with 3 kids. Shirley was sick in bed with the flu, so she and her 3 kids were all at home. Shirley sent her 5-year-old son to the store that was down the street for some soup so she could make it for her family. Shirley is still in bed when someone knocked on the door. When her son opens the door, Dennis forces his way into the home with a weapon. Shirley walked out to see who was there and was shocked to see Dennis in her home.
Naturally.
He told Shirley that he has a problem with sexual fantasies and she needs to help him. He tells her that while unpleasant things are going to happen to her, she will survive if she helps him. Now, Shirley has her 3 kids right there.
I was like, is a 5-year-old still sitting there?
Yes, her 3 kids are right there.
Oh my gosh.
But Shirley helps Dennis lock the children in a bathroom. She's hoping to spare them from the trauma of seeing what's going to happen to her.
Yeah.
Dennis took Shirley to the bedroom to SA her, but the whole time her kids were screaming and crying and banging on the door.
Yeah.
As you would expect. Then the phone rings and just completely interrupts his fantasy. So Dennis stops, cleans up, and heads back to his car. Don't get excited. The children broke out of the bathroom window and ran to their neighbor's house to get help. When they came back to the house, they found Shirley with a bag over her head and a ligature around her neck. Dennis followed up this attack with another letter sent to the Wichita Eagle newspaper, and it contained a poem related to Shirley's murder. In this letter, he said the kids were lucky because he intended to kill them as well. Later, Dennis would say that he was all wound up when he murdered Shirley. That's why he deviated from his original plan. He was wound up, ready to kill these other 2 women.
And then they weren't there.
So it just got him even more wound up. Dennis left no physical evidence after Shirley's murder. He cleaned up very well and seemed to know what he was doing. The police couldn't even find a hair at the crime scene. The children also didn't give great descriptions of Dennis. Of course.
They're kids.
They were able to connect this to the Otero case, though,
Oh.
because of the rope and the knots he used. After this murder, the community was full of fear.
Yeah.
Dennis waited until December of 1977 before striking again. His next victim would be Nancy Fox, which he named Project Fox Hunt. Dennis did his normal process and stalked Nancy, even going to her job. Nancy was a 25-year-old woman who lived alone and worked 2 jobs. She came home from work, made some dinner, and was eating just like any other night. What she didn't know was that Dennis was hiding in her closet. When he came out of the closet, Nancy yelled at Dennis and told him to get out of her house. She tried to call the police, but of course Dennis cut the phone lines. He told her he was suffering from sexual problems and she needed to help him with them. Similar to Shirley, he told Nancy that nothing bad would happen to her if she cooperates. So Nancy cooperates, hoping she would survive the attack. He bound Nancy and strangled her. As he was strangling her, he whispered in her ear, "I'm BTK." She was instantly terrified even more, knowing she knew she wouldn't survive. Her fighting him and struggling during the attack just aroused him more. After Nancy was dead, he proceeded to masturbate at the crime scene. Nancy's death wasn't reported on for a few days, so Dennis made a phone call to the police. He wanted to report the murder, so he used a payphone on the street. After he was done with his call, a firefighter came up to use the phone, got a description of him, but it still wasn't helpful enough to ID the killer. At the crime scene, the police found a broken window and the deceased body of Nancy Fox. When the police found Nancy, she was still tied up, and it was evident that she had been strangled with a nylon stocking. Before he left, Dennis took the phone off the hook, cut the phone lines on the outside of the house, and dumped her purse on the coffee table. They found the semen from Dennis masturbating and collected it again, hopefully for a future test. The police also noticed that something was missing, Nancy's driver's license. Dennis took her driver's...
Are we taking trophies
Yep,
now?
we're taking it. Have something to help him relive the moment and keep his fantasy alive. I also want to point out, he worked for ADT Security and he is breaking into these people's homes. He knows what he's doing.
His poor wife and children, because he's out doing this and then going home to his family.
And as far as I can tell, they had no idea. At this time, Dennis was creating his own pornography. He would draw pictures of women being tortured and bound up with fear in their eyes, similar to what he drew when he was younger, but more dark. 2 months after Dennis killed Nancy, he was frustrated that no attention was being paid to his murder. He also enjoyed the cat and mouse game that he was playing with the police, because they're still unable to link any of the murders to him. So since he wasn't getting attention, he decided to write another letter to the Wichita Eagle newspaper. He sends them a poem called Shirley Locks. The Wichita Eagle does not do a story about the poem, which further frustrates Dennis. He sent another letter, but this time to the Cake TV station. It's a local broadcasting network in Wichita. This letter was titled, "Oh, Death to Nancy." In this letter, he wrote BTK 4 times at the top with a noose beside each BTK. Here's a little excerpt from a poem that he included in the letter. "I'll stuff your jaws till you can't talk. I'll bind your legs till you can't walk. I'll tie your hands till you can't make a stand. And finally, I'll close your eyes so you can't see. I'll bring sexual death unto you for me." Another page of the letter contained a drawing that Dennis made of Nancy's body and how it was arranged at the crime scene. A third page of the letter contained writing by Dennis that I will not read directly from, but it describes his erotic feelings for Josie Otero, the daughter from the Otero family murders.
Oh my.
He included some things in the letter that he took from Nancy as well. The police made the decision to release the most recent letter and took the opportunity to announce that there was a serial killer among them. The police chief went on Cake TV to make this announcement. They were finding it very difficult to pinpoint Dennis due to his randomness, and this caused fear in the public.
Yeah.
People started locking their doors, which they've never done before.
It's Wichita, man.
Yeah. They were just afraid to be alone. The randomness part is how he got away with it for so long. In July of 1984, the police started a secret task force called the Ghostbusters. Right.
I love that.
They had access to all the case file information. After they tracked it down from all over the police station, it was scattered everywhere. And they had access to new computer technologies that didn't exist in the 1970s. There are a couple great things about this task force. First, they had no knowledge of the investigation, so they were able to view it with fresh eyes. Maybe see something the other investigators didn't. Second, they started creating databases. They would figure out what weapon he used, research everyone who bought that weapon, and load it into a database. They would do that with various pieces of evidence for the purpose of establishing a pattern.
That makes sense.
It does, and it's very smart to do it that way, I think. While doing this, they did determine that there was absolutely no pattern for his victims. They were all just completely random. I will point out that Catherine Bright and Julie Otero both worked at the same factory on the same assembly line, but that's the only connecting factor.
That's weird.
It is a little coincidental.
Do you think he knew that?
I don't know. Meanwhile, after a 7-year cooling off period, which is extremely long for someone like him.
Oh, extremely.
He decided to pick another victim. He chose Maureen Hedge on April 27th, 1985. Maureen was 53 years old and lived down the street from Dennis. This was convenient for him because he could stalk her easily from his own home. Also of note, he chose an older victim rather than a young woman this time.
So he's switching up victims now, too.
Yes. He's getting older, so he chose an older woman that he would be able to control better.
Okay. That makes sense.
He did his usual...
I hate that makes sense, but that makes sense.
Yeah. Dennis did his usual thing of cutting the phone line, then entered her home and waited for her. Maureen came home with a man. They sat and talked and laughed for a while before the man went home. Dennis comes out of the closet he was hiding in and strangles her.
I bet he was so annoyed.
Oh, yeah. He does something different with Maureen, though.
Okay.
That he's never done before. He moved her body.
Oh.
Dennis took her body to the basement of a Lutheran church.
Oh, he didn't just move it like in the house.
No.
He took it and left. Wasn't he a Lutheran? Wasn't he involved in the Lutheran church?
He was.
Okay.
He was the president of his congregation.
That's it. Was it that church?
It just said a Lutheran church, so I don't know if it was the Christ Lutheran Church. He wasn't the president at this time, so I don't know if he would have had keys and access to it. I'm not sure. But at this church, he would pose the body and take pictures of her. After his photo session, he took her body and dumped it in a ditch.
So he moved her not once, but twice.
Yes. After Maureen, there are 2 more women that we need to discuss. The first is Dolores Davis.
Sammy, this is getting to be a lot.
I know. We're almost done. Not really. We're like 3/4 of the way. The first,
it's still not as bad as Anthill Kids.
It's not. If you haven't listened to that one,
don't get me wrong. This is rough, but Anthill Kids, go check out our podcast.
You want to see why Nicole freaked out when I was talking about a 5-year-old boy? Go listen to Anthill Kids.
Listen, it was interesting. Okay, let's keep talking about Mr. Rader.
So the first woman I want to discuss, well, the second to last woman, I guess, is Dolores Davis, who he murdered on January 19th, 1991. It seems Dennis has no issue taking long breaks from his crimes. Anyway, Dennis could not figure out how to get into Dolores' home. So he threw a concrete block through her window. Dolores was home, sitting on her couch reading a book. Dennis proceeds...
Oh, Dennis is brave now.
Yes. He proceeds to strangle Dolores, and he moved her body as well. He took Dolores to a bridge and placed her under it. The sun was starting to come up, though, so he left her there. But he did come back the next night when he put a mask on her and photographed her. She was found the next day by a boy walking his dog. The second woman we need to discuss is Vicky...
Oh, here we go. Not pronouncing things again.
Wegerle.
Okay.
Vicky was murdered on September 16th, 1986, so before Dolores. But she was not originally thought to have been a BTK murder.
Okay. What was different?
Vicky was home while her husband was at work when Dennis broke into the home and murdered her. Bill, Vicky's husband, came home for lunch like he did every day and found Vicky on the floor. He called an ambulance, which took her to a hospital, but it was too late and the life-saving measures failed. The police investigated this case, of course, but they thought that Bill, Vicky's husband, was the one who committed the murder. One thing didn't make sense about that theory, which is that Vicky's driver's license was missing. They didn't charge Bill for the murder, but they also didn't connect it to
Anybody
BTK.
else either, yeah.
Let's fast forward a little bit to 2004. Dennis has been fairly quiet in the years since Maureen's murder. He was watching TV one day and saw a story on Cake TV about the 30th anniversary of the Otero family murders. Cake TV had a guest on the show, a professor who was researching the case and writing a book. Dennis became furious. He did not want someone else writing his story.
It wasn't over yet.
By this point, though, the police thought that he was dead or he left the state.
Because it'd been so long.
Yeah, he's been inactive for so long. Much to their dismay, Dennis wrote another letter to the Wichita Eagle. He wrote the return address as Bill Thomas Killman, BTK. The letter was also postmarked on the 27th anniversary of the Shirley Fox murder. In the letter,
can't just be coincidence.
No. And I read that the return address was to a vacant building. In the letter, he included 3 blurry photos of someone on a floor and an old driver's license picture. These pictures were of Vicky's dead body and her missing driver's license. So then they knew, okay, he's the one who murdered her too. They knew this letter was legitimate because it included the BTK symbol, which had never been released to the public. Now the police were questioning any other murders that Dennis may have committed. They decided to hold a press conference after receiving the letter. Their goal was to set up communication with BTK. So they held planned press conferences, and these press conferences were designed very meticulously.
Try to lure him in there.
I'm sorry?
Like to try to lure him to the conferences?
Yeah, to try to encourage him to communicate with them. Every word that was said was intentional. One thing they said during the press conference was that BTK would be an interesting man to talk to try to get him to communicate.
Stroke that ego.
Yeah. After the press conference, BTK sent a chapter book to Cake TV. It was more like a puzzle for them to figure out that contained clues to the murders. He told them he wanted to be the one to tell his own story. The book contained 13 chapters with titles that include A Serial Killer is Born, Fetish, PJs, Final Curtain Call, and Will There Be More? Will There Be More was the 13th chapter. One title, though, PJs, was confusing.
Yeah.
It could be referring to a professor and poet named P.J. Watt. He used her poem as inspiration for his O Death to Nancy. Oh. Her poem's called O Death, and it's similar. He changed wording to fit his. The FBI did confirm that they believe there's a connection between the two.
That makes sense.
Dennis began sending postcards to Cake TV with clues that were sort of like a scavenger hunt.
Tell me you want to be like the Zodiac without telling me you want to be like the Zodiac.
He'd give a clue that would lead to another clue, and so on. The first clue led to a cereal box under a streetlight. This cereal box contained a Barbie doll bound up and jewelry. He also sent a package to Cake TV with jewelry in it, all the jewelry that he stole from victims. Yeah. The final package...
I'm impressed he's giving away his trophies.
Yeah.
That's weird.
I don't understand that part. The final package was left in a Home Depot employee's truck with more dolls and jewelry. One thing Dennis didn't plan for was that the Home Depot had CCTV cameras in the parking lot.
He worked in security. How did he not scope that out?
You would think he would think to look for that. The police reviewed the footage and saw a vehicle enter their parking lot, a man get out of the vehicle, place a package in the employee's truck, and drive off. They couldn't see his face, but they were able to tell that it was a Jeep Grand Cherokee. This was the first piece of evidence that the police had that Dennis did not give to them. Dennis continued writing to the police. He told them he would put a clue in the classifieds in the newspaper. So the police decided to respond to him via the classifieds. One day, Dennis asked if the police could trace a floppy disk. The police could, in fact, trace a floppy disk, but they didn't want to tell him that, so they told a little lie. The police told Dennis they weren't able to trace floppy disks, so Dennis sent them one. He made a mistake when making the floppy disk, though. When he copied the original file that he had...
Do we need to explain what a floppy disk is?
Isn't it like a CD for your computer?
It's not a CD.
Oh.
It is legitimately a plastic square that you would shove into the computer and it would like lock into place.
Oh, I thought it like a disc, like a circle.
No.
Oh.
No, it was...
So apparently you need to explain.
Oh, no. I'm going to insert a picture up.
Okay, that works.
What is a floppy disk? Children.
Well, he made a mistake when making the floppy disk. When he copied his original file. So when he copied the original file that he had, the disk encrypted where it was copied. None other than Christ Lutheran Church. The church where Dennis was now congregational president.
That was a struggle.
It was. The police went to Dennis's home because they looked up the church. On the website, it said he was the president. So they went to
You would naturally go there even if...
Right.
To question him, not necessarily because they think he's BTK.
Until they pulled into his driveway.
And saw the Jeep Cherokee.
His Jeep Grand Cherokee.
Oh.
They did not approach him at this time.
Naturally.
They went back to the police station to devise a plan. They decided to do some surveillance on him so they would be able to get his pattern down. There was one problem. And this is why they could not arrest him right there. They had no physical evidence that he actually killed anyone. They were just assuming. Not really assuming. They were following...
Look, they had a floppy disk.
Yeah, they had the flop, but they couldn't prove that he was the one who made the floppy disk.
Okay.
They couldn't prove that he was the one driving his vehicle, or he could have just been doing that for funsies. Why you would do that, I don't know, but they had no physical evidence linking him.
Okay.
So...
Was there another victim? Is that what they had to wait on?
No.
Okay.
They went back to their DNA sample that they collected, the semen from the crime scenes. One of the investigators working the case was familiar with the college that Dennis's daughter went to, and he knew that they had a medical center on campus for the students. He came up with the idea to get a sample of her pap smear.
What?
To compare with the semen sample.
Is that legal?
DNA.
That doesn't feel legal.
A judge did sign off on this. They went and got a warrant for the sample. And they sent it out for testing.
Was the judge a man? I feel like the judge was a man.
I think so. When they got the results, like it was a sample that had already been taken. They didn't make her come in, do a pap smear just for the sample.
I mean, still though, like of all the things, I'm sure she
Yeah.
had blood work done
Right.
too.
When they got the results, they confirmed. The documentary I watched said that the guy called and said, "I can't tell you that Dennis Rader is BTK, but I can tell you that this girl's father is BTK." Because they had her sample, not Dennis's sample to compare it to. But they're like, okay, got it. We know her dad is Dennis Rader. He's BTK. On February 25th, 2005, Dennis Rader's over 30-year-long reign of terror came to an end. Dennis left for lunch at 12:15, just like he did every day. Except on this day, 3 police cars surrounded him on the side of the road. They handcuffed him and put him in the back of a car where the lead investigator was sitting. The investigator asked BTK if he knew why the police were there. Dennis replied with, "I have a pretty good idea."
I'm sure you did, cowboy.
Yeah.
What?
A few hours into the interrogation, one of the detectives looked at Dennis and says, "Come on, Dennis, just tell us who you are." And Dennis finally admits to his crimes by simply saying, "I'm BTK." Dennis Rader was charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder. Now the police were able to search his home. During their search, they found a secret crawl space. In this crawl space, the police found Polaroid pictures and the tools that Dennis would use to kill his victims. They also got to search his office at his job. They found a BTK cabinet. This cabinet contained BTK memorabilia, such as newspaper clippings and photographs.
Seriously?
They also found pictures that he took of himself. These photos are disturbing to look at. I'm going to have you review before we insert any. He would halfway bury himself. He would dress as a woman and be bound. He'd use masks and even wrap himself in plastic. Now,
Is he using this in the spank bank for himself?
I don't know. It's so weird. And I'm not saying that if you're into bondage or anything like that, or if you dress as a woman when you're a man, there's nothing wrong with that. When you're doing it and hurting other people is when it's wrong. And I think it's unusual for this man to have these pictures of
and
himself.
them not be for anyone else.
Yes.
Like if they were for other people even. Hey, don't get me wrong, it's not my cup of tea, but, we don't yuck anyone else's yum.
No, we don't.
But, that's just, ooh.
Well, Dennis pled guilty to the murders. He
Gosh,
was not remorseful. He did not apologize. He even referred to the Otero murders as putting them down. Like they were animals.
There was a baby involved.
There was I think 9 and 11.
Oh, okay, still. Babies.
But, yeah, multiple. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences, which he is currently serving at a Kansas prison. Dennis's wife, Paula, was granted an emergency divorce from her husband.
Yeah, I should hope so.
She's been out of the public eye ever since.
I don't blame her.
Dennis's daughter exchanges letters with her father in an effort to find out why this happened. And that's the story of BTK. That is what I hate. He named himself.
Who does that?
I mean, I hate all of it, but that one really just...
Like, he gave himself notoriety.
Yep. And that's what he wanted. He wanted the attention.
Well,
he got it.
Fortunately, he got it.
To not even leave a hair as you're assaulting someone. I mean, he fought with Catherine Bright and her brother Kevin.
I walk through a room and I lose 12 hairs.
Yeah, right. And to not leave any, hair samples.
Maybe he was in, a rubber suit?
Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, me either. That's kind of why I'm I'm not trying to be facetious or anything.
But maybe, based on the pictures he had, maybe that was...
That is literally the only explanation I can come up with is, a latex suit.
Yeah, because you're doing physical activity, whether it's fighting with someone or essaying someone, you're bound to lose a hair.
Not a right time to use the word bound, man.
It was not. That was not good.
Oh.
Anyway, guys.
That's all for our episode today. Make sure you find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Spooky Sleuths Pod.
Smash that like button. Make sure you subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on the videos that we post here.
And on that note, stay spooky, friends.